try to be as succinct as possible and leave as much time for the applicant, particularly the public who are in the system. This is the entire site plan that shows the maximum design. This might be reconfigured, albeit slightly, depending on discussions that renewables intends to continue to have with particular property owners with respect to screening. So again, this is the overall site plan. You have had this for some time. This has been on our website. So I don't know at this time in particular need to belabor this. Now, Ms. Kaufman did bring up Public Act 233 of 2023. So Ms. Kaufman, I'm going to provide an overview, and if I'm wrong or missing some information, by all means, jump in. But Public Act 233 of 2023 went into effect on November 29, 2024. And what it does, as Ms. Kaufman said, it generally preempts local units of government from overseeing siting of certain utility scale renewable energy facilities, including solar, wind, and energy storage facilities. Now, there are certain what they call nameplate capacities that a particular project would would meet in order to qualify, if you will, for some of the standards in PA 233. For solar, the minimum nameplate capacity is 15 megawatts. So as I indicated, the Northern Water Solar Park is proposed at 110 megawatts, so it does fall sort of under that threshold, over that threshold, really. Now, nameplate capacity is another way of saying the intended full load sustained output of a solar facility. 110 megawatts in the case of Northern Waters. P233 establishes statewide standards, again, delegates siting authority for utility scale renewable energy facilities to the state, particularly the Michigan Public Service Commission. Now, to require renewable energy developers to obtain approval from a local unit of government, that local unit of government must have what's called a compatible renewable energy ordinance, or CREO, for short. Now, CREOs must comply with statewide standards. Public Act 233 does include standards for minimum setbacks, fencing requirements, and maximum height requirements. So, the county did draft, and it was adopted by the Board of Commissioners, Ordinance Amendment 186. And that, of course, as I mentioned a few moments ago, enables Cheboygan County to review this project. In the absence of that CREO, if the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners had not done so, EDP Renewables would have gone directly to the state without really any oversight by Cheboygan County. Particular thing to remember that's quite important is that CREOs may not include requirements that are considered more stringent than those identified in the Act. And local units with more restrictive standards that wish to impose more restrictive standards may face legal challenges. One of the standards in the county's solar energy ordinance, as some of you might be aware, approximately 7 years ago, actually no, it was about 5 years ago now, Cheboygan County adopted specific standalone standards, requirements for utility scale solar energy projects. And in those standards is a requirement for screening. There are very specific requirements for screening. However, those requirements are considered more stringent by Public Act 233. However, the applicant, EDP Renewables, has communicated a strong willingness to adhere to some of the standards that, quite frankly, they're not obligated to adhere to, namely screening. So we don't get to that. So I'm gonna run through real quick the various site plans that um, are respective of the various sections that the Northern Water Solar Park will encompass. This is section 4. This is the extreme northeast portion between Page Road at the north, Chamberlain Road at the east, Twin Lakes Road at the south, and Cronin Road at the west. You can see the array is shaded in blue there, roughly to the lower right, just north of Twin Lakes Road, and just east of Cronin. Section 5 site plan. Now, this is the north central portion between Page Road to the north, Owens Road to the east, Twin Lakes Road at the south, and North Black River Road to the west. You can see again there are arrays that are indicated in blue, the extreme left. Um, Section 6 site plan. Now, this depicts the extreme northwestern portion of the proposed solar park. North Black River Road at the north and east, Trudeau Road at the west, and Twin Lakes Road at the south. So you can see section 6 has a fair bit of coverage by PV arrays. And there's also, you probably know the electric transmission line that roughly cuts this section in half diagonally to the center of that image. And it stands to reason that a number of arrays would be relatively close to the transmission, as well as the substations that we'll talk about in a moment. Section 8 site plan. This is the south central portion between Twin Lakes Road, Owens Road to the east, Ross Road at the south, and North Black River Road to the west. It's a large array just to the north and east of Black River, which is the extreme southwest of this graphic. You can see the electric transmission line, substations at the upper portion of this graphic. Section 9, this site plan shows the extreme southeast portion of the proposed project, Twin Lakes Road at the north, Chamberlain Road at the east, Ross Road at the south, and Owens Road to the west. So landscaping plan, I'll defer to the applicant to expound on this a little bit more, but again, this was included in your respective packets. And I'll talk a little more about the landscaping plan shortly. With respect to that landscaping plan as part of the overall vegetation management maintenance plan, what the applicant is proposing are evergreen trees, staggered rows of evergreen trees spaced approximately 15 feet apart, 4 to 6 feet in height. The applicant's proposing almost 19,000 linear feet of screening. And as I indicated, would be one evergreen planted per 13 feet. Total number of trees would be approximately 1,236. So one thing I didn't mention at the front end of this presentation is that level 3 solar energy systems are permitted with a special use permit in the agriculture and forestry management, vacation protection zone districts. The Northern Water Solar Park would be constructed in a single phase beginning in 2027, with anticipated completion taking from 12 to 18 months. And for the applicant, it would be operational by 2028, proposed to be operation by the 2028. The interconnection point would be located at existing electrical transmission, of course, adjacent to the substation site at Twin Lakes Road, east of North Black River Road. As far as the generated power, it will flow along the transmission line to residences and business in the area, with excess power proposed to be directed to neighboring towns and even points beyond. And it is estimated that a Northern Water solar park would produce enough energy, 110 megawatts, to power approximately 30,000 homes, with an anticipated useful lifespan of 35 years. The applicant has indicated that after that useful lifespan, the project will either be powered or decommissioned. as was mentioned, the arrays would be mounted on single axis tracking systems, and that's in order to facilitate maximum solar absorption by allowing arrays to track the sun's path, of course. Now, regarding the substations I mentioned previously, there are two. There's an EDP renewable substation that has yet to be constructed, whereby underground collection from the arrays would feed into the power. Then would be stepped up to higher voltage to facilitate distribution. And then the second substation would be essentially constructed by the owner of the transmission line, in this case, Michigan Electric Transmission Company, METC, or ITC, hence the name Dakota substation by others. This would be ultimately the point at which utilities would have ownership of the project electrons and connect directly to their existing and owned transmission line. Close up of the substations and the operation and maintenance facility that would also include a small office. This is just south of Twin Lakes Road. As far as the generator lead line, that would comprise several hundred feet of overhead transmission, and that would connect to the utility substation, that being a substation owned by others. The O&M facility or building would be constructed near the electric right of way, as you saw from the previous graphic. The typical operations and maintenance activities include liaison and remote monitoring, inverter operations, security and management, and repair and maintenance. The applicant, as you might have noted, did provide what are called visual impact simulations that are depicted in the project depicted from some locations around the project site, and including different stages of vegetation growth. The arrays would be enclosed by perimeter fencing, as I mentioned. That fencing would be a minimum of 7 feet in height around the PV area and 8 feet in height around the substation facilities. The lockable access gates provided with Knox boxes and keys for emergency personnel and Northern Waters personnel. As far as grading is concerned, the applicant has indicated that grading would be limited. We want to maintain as much of the existing natural contours as possible, but there would be some grading required to smooth some of the more hilly terrain areas, so you meet tracker requirements. As you suspect, utility scale solar is best on level sites, very little topography. The existing drainage patterns would generally be maintained. The final ground cover would consist of grasses that are suitable for growth in the area, so more than likely native grass species that would require minimal maintenance, needing no watering. As far as maintenance is concerned, of the vegetation, the ground cover, there would be occasional mowing to preclude or minimize shading of the PV, and this would be visually monitored during operations to ensure that the vegetative cover is sufficiently maintained, to, among other things, prevent erosion and provide what they determine to be stormwater benefits. 12-foot gated security fencing would be installed and maintained. The applicant, as far as fencing is concerned, has also spoken a bit about the possibility of including wildlife permeable fencing that typically is designed in gaps large enough for small and medium-sized wildlife to pass through unimpeded relative. Now, the final design of that is going to be I largely suspect, depending on the permit requirements through DNR among other agencies. But that has been proposed as being one of the wildlife friendly design aspects of the Northern Water Solar Park. You might have noted that the applicant did conduct a telecommunications interference study or studies. That was to determine possible interference with nearby or area telecommunications equipment and services. the findings of those studies, as memory serves, indicates that there would be minimal, if any, interference on local telecommunications equipment and services. And finally, on this slide anyway, take note that the special use application site plan waiver request is from the requirement that the site plan be drawn at 1 inch with 100 feet or less. I mean, this project is too large a scale to provide site plans with that scale. So that's a perfectly legitimate, rational reason for requesting that waiver. As far as runoff volume and flow, it's proposed not to exceed existing ag runoff per EDP studies. Permanent stormwater detention is deemed unnecessary, save perhaps for areas with proposed impervious surfaces, namely the NOAA and facility in the nearby substation facilities. Water quality would be ensured through vegetative cover, and of course would partly function as runoff erosion control. Now the screening, I mentioned early in the presentation that per PA 233, screening is technically regarded by the Michigan Public Service Commission as more stringent than what's in PA 233, but the Act does allow, as alluded to, renewable energy developers to work with the local unit of government to see what they'd be willing to do in terms of compliance with whatever locally adopted renewable energy ordinance. In this case, screening again, it would be optimized to address existing residences on other sensitive areas. Now, EDP Renewables has had a fairly robust, a pretty darn robust, dare I say, public outreach effort and campaign. There was an open house held, it was May 14th this year. We're in Township Hall. And throughout the process, and actually well before the process, EDP Renewables has been in communication with a number of property owners in the area of the proposed project to discuss, among other things, screening and potential impacts of the proposed project on, again, aesthetics, screening requirements, any detrimental impacts from the arrays, the substations, and so on. Private well and septic would be provided for operations and maintenance, and of course, the project would have to work through soil erosion and sedimentation control measures. Those would be implemented and maintained throughout the construction phase. And the applicant has indicated that in order to enhance habitat biodiversity, native seed mixes known to be, quote, pollinator friendly would be planted and maintained under and near to the arrays. So as far as the entire approximately 1,700 acre site is concerned, it apparently does not contain any significant environmentally sensitive areas, namely formally designated areas of critical habitat, nor is it known to include state or federal threatened or endangered species at this time. There are required environmental impact studies. Those would need to be completed prior to construction. Those would be, of course, designed to assess potential impacts on land, wildlife, their migration patterns, and the overall local ecosystems. And as I suggested a few moments ago, the findings from these studies may result in modification of the project layout. The initial slide showing the overall site plan is again a maximum build out that is unlikely to be built out to that depiction. Of course, I'll let the applicant expound on that a little bit more, but some of these studies are likely going to result in a small measure of modification to um, the proposed site plans that were included in the packets and what was shown up on the screen. As far as wetlands are concerned, there are a number of areas that are, again, zone lake and stream protection. There are identified wetlands, the project site, the project applicant has indicated that efforts will be made to minimize or avoid impacts upon those areas during clearing, grubbing, site preparation, or some construction phase. Traffic access. Following roads would be used for construction access, and there are 9 here. Stands to reason that the roads are, as indicated on the screen, because the project does border all of these roads to various extents. Now, of course, it is expected that there's going to be an influx of traffic during the site preparation and construction phases. However, it's not anticipated that during the operational phase or during operations that a large number of traffic would be generated. And that is largely due to minimal need for maintenance and equipment replacement. The big influx, of course, is going to be during construction, upon completion, the number of vehicles and the amount of vehicle trips would be greatly reduced. Now, access to inverter stations, for example, those would be consistent of gravel surfaces or similar surfaces capable of accommodating emergency vehicles, of course, and they would provide turnaround roadway, adequate turnaround roadway for emergency vehicles to egress safely and relatively easily. And this is an important point that during construction, Northern Waters is to coordinate with Cheboygan County Road Commission to address damage to local and primary roads and ensure compliance with the requirements of the road use agreement. That agreement, the draft agreement, has been submitted. I believe that was included in the packet, and I believe our attorney, Catherine Kaufman, has a copy of the draft. So the road commission and the applicant would be in regular communication to ensure that the requirements as set forth in the final release are honored. What are the requirements enforcement? Previous slide showing the roads that are going to be used to access for construction. Finally, with regard to traffic controls would be used to raise awareness for local community regarding the presence and travel of construction vehicles, as well as the maintenance and repair of local and primary roads as needed. During operation, there are 2 access or haul route options to the project site. Those include under option 1, which is called the south option from 933. It would be east on Manhattan Road, approximately 5 miles. Then north on North Black River Road, approximately 1.25 miles. Option 2 would be from the north the east, Orchard Beach Road, approximately 1.9 miles, then southeast on South River Road, approximately 4.6 miles, and then north on North Black River Road for approximately a quarter mile. As far as setbacks are concerned, the project proposes the following minimum setback distancing. These minimum setbacks that are proposed conform to the minimums required per County Ordinance 186, that is our CREO. And that would be 300 feet from the occupied community buildings and dwellings located on non-participating properties, 50 feet from public road rights of way, and 50 feet from non-participating parties and shared property lines. The 300-foot proposed setback from the nearest exterior wall occupied buildings is greater than the original minimum 100 feet required by the county zoning ordinance under our solar energy ordinance or component in Article 17. Now, several occupied dwelling owners on participating parcels have chosen to waive setbacks as indicated on the site plan. And again, I'm sure the applicant will elaborate a little bit more on that shortly. As far as noise and sound generation, there was a sound propagation modeling conducted at multiple receptor locations around the proposed project site. Uh, and these sound measured or recorded range from 32 decibels to 49 decibels. And that modeling did indicate that levels during the operation phase would be below normal or below local and state regulatory limits, rather, including the 60 decibel maximum per section 1736 of the ordinance. And that section is part of our solar energy ordinance, again, out of the 17. The results of the sound propagation modeling effort did indicate that the maximum sound from a given property line would be near to the substation location, the south of Twin Lakes Road, and that was measured at 49 decibels. So, all in all, the sound level recorded comply with those various sections noted on the screen that limit noise to a maximum of 55 decibels at the nearest dwellings out of the wall. Again, over 18,000 linear feet of vegetative screening is proposed. I mentioned that earlier. I don't see the need necessary to belabor this. I touched upon the staggered row of evergreens proposed and proposed height and spacing. Of course, screening would have to be maintained for the life of the project. And then prior to construction, landscaping plans will be developed in collaboration with the adjacent non-participating landowners that are deemed to be lacking sufficient natural vegetation or structures that would obscure views of the overall facility. There's a vegetation management plan that was submitted, and the principal rationale for that would be to preserve and enhance aesthetics and, of course, restore natural habitats that might be degraded or compromised during site preparation and construction. Now, that vegetation management plan does provide an overview of the methods and the best management practices for stormwater management that include minimizing erosion and sedimentation. Now, that vegetation management plan does intend to ensure a successful installation and management of vegetation, again, throughout construction and perhaps most importantly during operation if approved. Vegetative screening would avoid existing wetlands and easements and would be a safe distance from fencing to allow for that vegetation, ample room for growth, and it would not obstruct sight lines or vehicular traffic. Now I'm coming to the end. So now there was a dark skies plan submitted as one of the appendices. Now that proposes to minimize glare through the use of shielded lighting fixtures and positioning those fixtures away from adjacent homes and roads, and that is also a requirement of the zoning ordinance. Now, the lighting would be limited to the O&M facility and the substation facilities. There's no lighting proposed for the array itself. The applicant has indicated they would utilize energy efficient lighting, such as LEDs, and would also minimize the potential for light pollution as follows. Again, minimizing the amount of lighting as I touched upon, properly shielded fixtures that I touched upon, energy efficient lighting again. Also, motion sensors and dimming controls that would adjust the lighting based on activity. And then finally, the use of lighting with warm color temperatures below 3000 K, which studies have shown reduce attraction to insects and various wildlife. Now, the PV panels are, of course, going to be elevated. That will allow for a measure of infiltration. stormwater runoff analysis um, would result, according to that analysis, in comparatively reduced runoff compared to existing ag uses, and would improve water quality by reducing erosion and sediment. Um, I mentioned earlier that the Avalon deems permanent stormwater facilities largely to be unnecessary, except for those areas I mentioned earlier, namely the substation and O&M sites. The topography of the site is generally flat, as you very well know, ranges from, I believe, 185 feet to 200 feet if memory serves. And there would be no fill or equipment proposed within any FEMA 100-year floodplain. I mentioned earlier that SES plans would be implemented during construction, and natural drainage patterns are proposed not to be altered, due in part to the limited grading that's proposed. Now, as far as reviews from other agencies, other parties, the application supporting documents, among others, were provided to the Grand Township Supervisor, the Road Commission, District Health Department before, MDOT, the Illinois Fire Department, County Building Official, the DNR, and the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, and of course, Civil Council. And finally, as far as public comments are concerned, Department of Planning and Zoning did mail notices of public hearing for this application on June 17th to surrounding property owners within 300 feet of the subject properties. Now, as of today, this afternoon, 11 letters of opposition were received from 10 property owners. There were 2 letters of opposition submitted by the same property owner, and 2 letters of support received, including one letter from the Cheboygan County Economic Development Coalition. So with that, I am finally finished, and ask if there are any questions. Of course, the applicant is here with several members of the EDP team, and we have a large number of the public that I suspect wishes to speak. Mike.
Say one thing to make next time. I am Catherine Kaufman. I am the civil counsel for the county. Also, pretty cool. Catherine Kaufman, civil counsel for the county. And as Michael, Mr. Turris summarized Public Act 233, what I want everyone to have in the back of their minds is, as of November of last year, there were 2 choices. Let this project go completely to the state of Michigan, or adopt a compatible renewable energy ordinance, which is what this county did, and so that it can go through a local process here. However, it is very limited to what the county planning commission can consider. We heard the setbacks, 50 feet from a property line, 50 feet from a road, 300 feet from a dwelling or a community building on non-participating property. We can't do more than that. 25 feet height for the panels, 55 decibels at an outside wall of a non-participating dwelling or community building on another property. So it's very limited. And if in fact this planning commission denies the application on anything that's in that state law, then we will lose, the county could lose their intervention funds. So right now, if this does go to the Michigan Public Service Commission at some point, let's say the applicant, comes through this and they decide to go to the MPSC, we have up to $75,000 that will be given to the county to intervene in the MPSC case. If, however, I mean the county planning commission denies the application on anything that is in the state law, we will lose the intervention funds and our ordinance will be declared invalid by the MPSC. So all I'm trying to explain is there's a very tight framework that this planning commission can consider this application in. And you heard Mr. Turris explain the detailed submission. A couple other things about Public Act 233 that some of you may be aware of. There was an effort to collect signatures to put this on the ballot in November 2024 to vote to repeal this law. We did not get it. There were not enough signatures gathered, so it didn't go on the ballot. The other thing is there is pending legislation, 70+ municipalities joined together to bring a challenge against the MPSC, the Michigan Public Service Commission, and the order that they have adopted to implement this law. So that pending legislation, or excuse me, litigation is at the Court of Appeals right now. Not sure what's gonna happen with it. Many more municipalities have joined in support of that. But even if that's successful, all it will do is strike down the order that the Michigan Public Service Commission adopted to implement the law. So the law still remains in place. Lastly, there was legislation introduced in one of the state houses. I forget which one. I'm so sorry. I don't want to say the wrong thing because somebody will tell me I'm wrong. To repeal Public Act 233. It came out of whichever is the Republican controlled house that we have, and it's at the other house. So whether or not that will move, and that this law would be repealed remains to be seen. So all that just means is that this planning commission has very limited authority to what they can do. They're working on their compatible renewable energy ordinance, and things that Mr. Turris explained is essentially what they can consider, if that makes sense. Is there anything else you'd like me to add, Mr. Chair? Right. I don't know who's gonna control this microphone for the public comment. I don't think it's. Okay. I'm gonna hand it to you. Thank you. And I don't know if you want to put a line on or.
Sure. You have a presentation. But we're happy to, get the response hour to our presentation.
commissioners, we request, to the 5 minute break, we're going to have the applicants connect his laptop and his, presentation on his laptop as well as visual analysis that will likely show better, if you will, on his laptop. So we can get that. Should be a lot of those.